My name is Madeline, and I never imagined the people I trusted most would abandon me 5,000 miles from home. They left me stranded on a foreign sidewalk with nothing but the clothes on my back and laughter in their throats. That's the day I learned betrayal doesn't always come with shouting. Sometimes it slips into a cab while waving goodbye. Before we get into it, tell me, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments. I'd love to see how far this story reaches. Now here's how my life shattered and strangely began again. It started with a postcard-perfect morning in Valencia. Tourists moved in cheerful herds, the smell of espresso hung in the air, and I should have been happy. But I was. My sneakers dragged across the cobblestones like they knew what was coming. My parents, Susan and Greg, were 3 steps ahead, arguing about the map, not that it mattered. We weren't lost, at least not on the streets. Emotionally, that was another story. You never listen, my mom snapped, folding the guidebook too sharply. We said no drama today. I'm not creating drama, I said, jaw tight. I just asked why you booked a hotel for 2 people when you knew I was coming. A pause, the kind that prickles your skin before something explodes. You're 22, my dad said, turning to me with a smirk. Figure it out. You want independence, right? That stung more than I let on. We'd been fighting for days, about me deferring grad school, about me choosing Spain over law internships, about how disrespectful it was that I wanted to find myself instead of find a cubicle. But I never thought they'd actually punish me for it. Whatever, I muttered, crossing my arms. I'll just catch a cab back myself. That's when it happened. Mom pulled out her phone, waved down a taxi, and before I realized what was going on, they were sliding inside, slamming the door shut with a choreographed cruelty that felt rehearsed. We'll see how you get back, she called through the cracked window, her voice sticky with sarcasm. Maybe this trip will finally teach you something. And then they laughed, not bitterly, not nervously, just a clean, cutting chuckle as if I were a punchline. The taxi merged into traffic. I didn't run after it. I didn't scream. I stood there in the middle of the plaza, surrounded by sun-soaked architecture and happy strangers, trying to breathe through a silence that suddenly felt deafening. They really did it. They left me. I looked down at my hands, still holding the museum brochure we'd been arguing over 10 minutes ago. My fingernails dug into the edges until the paper tore. A street performer strummed his guitar nearby, his song too cheerful, too loud, too wrong. I turned away and wiped at my cheek, only then realizing I was crying. I told myself not to panic. I wasn't a child. I had money, I had a phone, I had options. Except I didn't, my bag gone. In the chaos of the fight, I'd left it on the bench beside the fountain. Passport, wallet, phone, all of it, my entire identity, my lifeline. I sprinted back across the square, weaving through tourists and pigeons and vendors. But the bench was empty, gone. My knees buckled, but I didn't fall. Not yet. I sat down slowly, heart slamming against my ribs, trying to recall the last time I saw someone near it. Nothing stood out, just a blur of faces and noise and my parents' retreating silhouettes. I was officially alone, in a city where I didn't speak the language, with no way to call for help, no money, no documents, and nowhere to go. The Valencia sunshine suddenly felt punishing. I hugged myself, trying to keep my voice from cracking as I muttered, okay, think. But all I could think about was my mother's smile, sharp as broken glass as the cab pulled away. Why did that hurt more than the abandonment itself? Stick around. Because that moment, me sitting on a hot bench with nothing but humiliation and rage in my pocket, wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning. The panic didn't come all at once. It crept in slowly, like cold water around my ankles. I told myself I was fine, that people got robbed in Europe all the time, that embassies existed for a reason. But the truth was, I didn't even know where the embassy was, or how to get there, or how to say help in Spanish. I stood from the bench and wandered back into the city, my mind spinning faster than my feet could keep up. The familiar streets we'd strolled through hours ago now twisted into something menacing. Storefronts blurred past me. The colors of Valencia, those warm terracottas and sun-faded blues, felt like a cruel joke against the ice in my chest. I ducked into a cafe, the kind that served overpriced sandwiches and catered to tourists. "Hi," I said, approaching the counter. Do you speak English? The woman behind the counter tilted her head, polite but confused. Phone, I tried. I was robbed, my passport, my telefono, she blinked. No telefono aquí, lo siento. I nodded and backed out, embarrassed. That same embarrassment curled inside me like a second skin, tighter than my jeans in this heat. I didn't want to cry again, not here. I tried asking a few more people on the street, but my broken, panicked English only got me blank stares or vague gestures I couldn't interpret. I found a tourist map near a bike stand, but every block I walked seemed to lead me further from anything recognizable. By the time I found a police station, I had convinced myself this would all be over soon. Surely the police could help. Surely there was some protocol for stranded Americans. I was imagining warm blankets and helpful calls to the embassy until I stepped inside. It was cold. Not physically. Valencia never quite loses its Mediterranean warmth, but emotionally. The officer at the desk didn't smile when I approached, didn't lean in kindly when I explained in slow, anxious words that I'd been robbed. He just stared. And when I finished, he tapped something into his computer and gestured toward a clipboard. Formulario, he said. I can't, I stammered. I don't speak. He held up a hand, impatient, then called something over his shoulder. Another officer appeared, slightly younger but just as tired-looking. He asked, You have ID? No, I said. My bag, it's gone. Phone, gone. He clicked his tongue and pointed to the clipboard again. Phil, speaks Spanish. I shook my head, my eyes beginning to sting again. Then go embassy, he said. Next. That was it. I stumbled outside into the afternoon heat, the brightness stabbing at my eyes like punishment for being so foolish. I walked. That's all I could do. I walked in circles until the city started to blend. Locals passed by me without a second glance. I started scanning trash bins for food wrappers, not because I was hungry, but because I didn't want to feel invisible. Hours passed. My feet ached. My lips cracked. I stopped trying to look purposeful and let myself drift like litter in the wind. At some point, the tourist areas faded, replaced by narrower streets and graffitied shutters. The kind of alleyways that feel less historic and more don't linger. The sun was beginning to set, dipping the city into gold and shadow. I hadn't eaten since breakfast. I hadn't spoken to anyone who looked me in the eye since my parents left. That's when the fear finally sank its claws in. I turned down a quieter lane, hoping to find a main road, but all I found was a dead end, chained dumpsters, a rusted fire escape, and a stray cat watching me like it knew I didn't belong here. My knees gave out. Not in some dramatic faint, just surrender. I slumped beside the wall, curling my arms around my knees as my breathing went shallow. What would I do if I didn't find help? What if no one found me? And worse, what if no one even looked? I thought about my parents. Where were they now? Lounging in the hotel suite they booked without me, laughing about how Madeline needs to toughen up. They really thought this was a lesson, and maybe it was, but not the one they expected. Because sitting there, alone in that shadowy alley, something inside me snapped, not like a twig, but like a chain. I realized they weren't coming back, and I couldn't wait to be rescued. By the time the sky turned from golden to bruised purple, I had given up pretending to be okay. Every car that passed echoed too loudly in the narrow streets. Every sudden shout from across the alley made my heart jolt. Valencia no longer felt like a postcard. It felt like a trap I had walked into with my eyes wide open and my hope wide shut. I kept moving, though. I couldn't stay in that alley forever. Not when my brain was beginning to spin in tight, anxious loops. I don't remember how far I walked, just that the streets began to empty. Restaurants filled with the lucky ones who had money and language and somewhere to be. I had none of those. The first drop of rain hit my forehead like a warning. Then another. Within minutes, the sky opened up, drenching the city with a sudden downpour that soaked through my thin cotton shirt and made my shoes squelch with every step. I ducked under an awning, one of those decorative tin roofs above a shuttered flower shop. The sign above me was curled and sun-faded. Flor de Amor. There were no flowers in the windows now, just locked grates and wilting petals behind glass. The rain was relentless, a sloppy, sideways storm that didn't care who was watching. I curled tighter into myself, sitting on the cold concrete with my arms wrapped around my knees, trying to hold in my body heat. It wasn't working. The wind was sharp. My wet clothes clung like punishment. I didn't cry, not because I was brave, but because I was empty. Tears are for people who still believe someone might hear them. I closed my eyes, willing the image of my mother's smile to leave me alone. That cruel, flippant smirk as the cab door closed, like she was proud of herself. It wasn't the abandonment that haunted me. It was the ease of it. I was disposable. To the two people who were supposed to love me most. What had I done that was so unforgivable? Defer law school, travel before I settled down, take one step outside the mold they built for me. A low rumble of thunder snapped me out of my thoughts. I shifted, trying to keep the wind from slicing across my legs. That's when I noticed it. A little girl, maybe 5 or 6, walking past the shop across the street, holding her mother's hand, clutching a pink umbrella with duck-shaped handles. She looked up at me for a moment, curious, then quickly turned away as her mother pulled her forward. Even children could sense that I didn't belong. I wasn't the backpacking kind of lost. I was the left-behind kind. The kind people instinctively avoid because they don't want your misfortune to rub off. A sudden gust of wind blew cold rain under the awning. I gasped and pressed further against the wall, teeth chattering. I hadn't eaten. I hadn't slept. My body was starting to revolt. I kept thinking about food, not out of hunger but as memory. The grilled cheese my dad used to make when I was sick. The cinnamon rolls my mom baked on holidays. Those moments felt imaginary now, like I had borrowed them from someone else's childhood. I don't know how long I sat there, shivering and silent. Maybe an hour, maybe 3. People passed occasionally, most didn't look. One man did and hurried away like I might ask for something he didn't want to give. I finally let my head rest against the glass of the shop window. Cold, damp, real. The storm was beginning to slow, just drizzle now. That's when I saw headlights. They moved slowly. Too slowly to be passing through. The black car rolled to a stop right in front of the florist shop, the engine purring quietly beneath the rain. My heart picked up speed, not from hope but fear. Was this another threat? The passenger window eased down, a man leaned over. Late 20s, maybe early 30s. Tousled dark hair, sharp brows, kind eyes that flickered with worry. "You okay?" he asked, his accent faint but clear. American, my throat caught. I hadn't heard English spoken gently in what felt like forever. I tried to speak, but all that came out was a hoarse sound. I swallowed and tried again. I don't know." "You lost?" he asked gently. I nodded, a small, broken nod. He looked me over quickly, not rudely, just enough to confirm what was obvious. Soaked clothes, empty hands, fear behind my eyes. He leaned closer. "I'm Noah. I live here now, but I grew up near Seattle. You need help." Seattle. It hit me like a warm wave, something familiar, something safe. "Yes," I whispered. "Please." He reached over and opened the passenger door, and I hesitated, because in all the fear and betrayal, I'd forgotten what it felt like to trust someone. But his voice cut through again, soft and certain. "You don't have to get in if you're scared, but it's warm and you look cold." I looked at him, really looked. And for the first time all day, my chest didn't tighten. It loosened, just enough. I stood on shaking legs, stepped forward, and slid into the warmth of the car. The car smelled like cinnamon. Not overpowering, just faint, woven into the fabric of the seats or maybe clinging to Noah's hoodie. The heater blasted warm air toward my feet, thawing the numbness in my toes. "You warm enough?" he asked as we pulled away from the curb. I nodded, pressing my hands against the vents like a child warming frozen fingers. "You hungry?" That one caught me off guard. My stomach, silent until now, let out a low, shameful growl. Noah smiled, not mockingly, but like someone who understood. "I'll take that as a yes." We didn't talk much on the drive. I was too exhausted to explain, and he seemed to know not to push. The rain had slowed to a drizzle. Outside the window, Valencia blurred into shadows and streetlights, the city quieter now, almost hushed. I had no idea where he was taking me, but something about the steady rhythm of the windshield wipers and the calm way he drove made me believe I wasn't in danger. Eventually, the buildings grew farther apart. We drove past small cafes with metal chairs stacked outside, orange trees shedding glistening leaves, and a mural of a dancing woman that reminded me of a book I used to love as a girl. I lived just outside the city, he said after a while, his voice soft like he didn't want to startle me. Not far, my mom's still up. She's going to want to feed you. I turned my head slowly. Your mom? Yeah, she's kind of the boss of the house, you'll see. I should have been more cautious. I should have asked questions. Where are we going? Who's there? Why are you doing this? But all I could do was nod again. When we finally pulled into a narrow driveway beside a low, white-walled house, the porch light flickered on. The place wasn't fancy, peeling paint on the shutters, an uneven tile roof, but it radiated something I hadn't felt in days. Warmth. Noah opened the car door for me, offering a hand to steady my trembling legs. You good? I think so, I whispered. He led me to the front door, tapping a few times before pushing it open. A burst of light and warmth rushed out to greet me. The smell hit first, something hearty, garlicky, and rich. Lentils maybe, or soup, my stomach coiled with need. A woman appeared in the doorway, her dark gray hair tied back in a low bun, a bright red scarf looped around her shoulders. She looked like someone who hugged a lot. Her eyes scanned me, wet, pale, shaking, and softened. Dios mío, she said, brushing past Noah and immediately wrapping me in a towel from the hall. You poor thing, come in, come in. This is Alina, Noah said from behind me. Mom? She didn't wait for me to respond. She led me straight to the small kitchen, bustling with energy even though it was nearly midnight. A pot steamed on the stove. The table was cluttered with mail, a stack of coloring books, and a bowl of lemons. Sit, Alina said, gently but firmly. Soup is ready. I lowered myself into the chair like a puppet whose strings had been cut. She handed me a bowl of thick lentil stew, set a spoon beside it, and added, almost as an afterthought, You're safe now. I don't know why those words undid me, but they did. Tears slipped down my cheeks as I lifted the spoon. Not from sadness, not even relief, just release. She didn't ask why I was there. She didn't demand details or explanations. She just kept refilling my bowl and folding dry towels over my shoulders, murmuring soft Spanish phrases I couldn't understand but somehow felt. After the third bowl, Noah sat across from me with a glass of water. I don't want to scare you with questions, he said, but do you want to tell me what happened? I looked down at the empty bowl, then up at his face, kind, patient, curious but not prying. My parents left me, I said. In the city, I nodded, on purpose. He blinked but didn't speak, didn't rush to offer pity or outrage, just waited. They said, let's see how you get back, and then they got in a cab. I thought they were joking. I felt the words falling out of me, one after another, like beads from a broken necklace. I didn't chase them. I thought maybe they'd circle back. Noah leaned forward, elbows on the table. But they didn't. No, and then someone stole my bag, passport, phone, everything. Alina gasped quietly from the stove but didn't interrupt. I went to the police, I continued, but I couldn't fill out the forms. I don't speak Spanish. I tried asking people, but I didn't know what to say. I couldn't even find the embassy. Noah sat back, exhaling slowly. I'm so sorry, Madeline. It was the first time he'd said my name. I hadn't even realized I told him. I just needed somewhere dry, I said. I didn't expect. I looked around the kitchen, still trying to understand how I ended up somewhere that smelled like home. Noah smiled gently. You needed more than dry, and you're welcome to stay as long as you need. I opened my mouth to argue, to say I'd figure something out, that I didn't want to be a burden. But Alina cut in, her accent thick but firm. You stay, you rest, then we fix. And that was it, no forms, no suspicion, just soup, towels, and a place to exhale. I woke up to the smell of bread baking. For a few seconds, I didn't remember where I was. The ceiling above me was white and slightly cracked, and the blanket tucked around my shoulders wasn't mine. Then it came rushing back. Valencia, the rain, the alley, Noah. I sat up slowly, still wrapped in warmth I hadn't expected to survive the night with. Alina had shown me to a small guest room after dinner. The bed had been freshly made. The sheets smelled of lavender, and she'd left a pair of dry pajamas folded at the foot. They weren't mine, of course, but the soft cotton had felt like luxury after shivering in damp clothes all day. My eyes drifted to the small window beside the bed. The sky was pale with morning. A soft breeze pushed through the curtains, carrying the scent of yeast and something sweet, orange maybe. Voices drifted down the hall. Spanish, fast and fluid, but gentle. Noah and Alina, probably. There was no urgency, no raised tones, just the rhythm of people who trusted each other. I swung my legs over the edge of the bed, still sore from yesterday's walking, and padded into the hallway. The house was quiet in a lived-in way, walls lined with family photos, a crocheted runner down the narrow hall. The kitchen light spilled onto terracotta tiles that still held a trace of the morning chill. "Buenos dias," Alina said when she saw me. I nodded, offering a shy, "Good morning." Noah looked up from the table where he was scribbling into a sketchbook. "Hey, you slept 10 hours, guess you needed it." "Is that all?" I croaked, voice still raspy. Alina motioned for me to sit, then placed a mug of warm milk in front of me. She slid a plate of toasted bread beside it, thick, crusty slices drizzled with olive oil and tomato pulp. "No coffee," she said, tapping the mug. "Too strong for empty stomach." I smiled faintly. "This is perfect, thank you." Noah put down his pencil. "We were going to the embassy today, thought we'd let you rest first." The embassy. The word alone made my pulse quicken. I hadn't even thought about it since last night. I'd been too busy convincing myself I wasn't dying of hypothermia or getting kidnapped. Now the logistics returned. The missing passport, the identity theft, the terrifying idea of starting from zero. "I don't even know where to start," I admitted, buttering the warm toast with shaky fingers. "You start by being a person again," Alina said with a firm smile. "Eat, dress, breathe." Noah laughed softly. "She means you're not doing anything until you've had a second slice." A surprising sound bubbled up in my chest, a laugh, small but real. I took another bite and let the warmth of it quiet the panic in my mind. The food didn't fix everything, but it made it easier to imagine that things could be fixed. After breakfast, Alina handed me a neatly folded bundle, jeans, a clean shirt, and a sweater. "No yours," she said, "but they work." The mirror in the hallway caught me off guard as I walked past. I barely recognized myself. My hair was a mess. My face still swollen from yesterday's tears. But beneath it all, there was something else, too. A kind of rawness that felt honest. Like I'd been peeled open by the storm and found something still beating underneath. When I returned to the kitchen, Noah had his keys in hand. "Ready?" I nodded. The drive back into Valencia was less tense than the night before. We passed sleepy shops with metal grates halfway up, older men sweeping leaves from their storefronts, and schoolchildren dragging backpacks twice their size. As we got closer to the embassy district, I finally asked the question that had been stuck in my throat since last night. "Why did you stop?" Noah kept his eyes on the road. "What do you mean?" "Last night, I was just a wet stranger sitting in the dark." He shrugged lightly. "You looked like someone who hadn't been seen in a while." That answer did something strange to me, not break me, but soften something brittle. I turned to the window, watching the buildings shift into the clean, official lines of Embassy Row. "You said you grew up near Seattle." "Bellevue, technically. Moved here after college. I help out at a local community center, art therapy for kids mostly." That made sense. There was something gentle in how he spoke, like he knew people could break even when they looked whole. At the embassy, the process began. Questions, forms, phone calls. Alina had come with us, insisting on helping with translations. She stood beside me like a shield, speaking rapid Spanish to the clerk who barely looked up until Alina leaned in and said something that made him freeze mid-sentence. I didn't know what she said, but suddenly I was a priority. Hours later, they told me what I already feared. A temporary passport would take time. Maybe a week, maybe longer. "But they'll help," Noah said, clapping my shoulder gently as we walked out. "We'll figure it out." I believed him. Because for the first time since my parents had vanished behind that cab door, I didn't feel alone. The next few days felt like someone had hit pause on the chaos. Not forever, just long enough to breathe. Noah's house, Alina's house, really became a soft cocoon where I could untangle the knots inside me without constantly flinching. Every morning started the same. Fresh bread, warm milk, Alina humming in the kitchen while the radio played quietly in the background. Songs were in Spanish, but the emotions didn't need translation. I helped where I could, washing dishes, folding laundry, trimming dead leaves off the potted plants by the window. Small things, but they grounded me, made me feel less like a ghost and more like someone who had survived something. On the third day, I stood beside Alina at the sink, drying a pan while she rinsed. "I wish I could say thank you better," I said. "Properly." She looked at me, eyes kind. "You say it every day." I shook my head. "No, I mean, in Spanish." She smiled, then tapped her chest. "You say it from here, that is enough." Still, that night, I sat with Noah at the kitchen table and asked him to teach me. "Just one word," I said, flipping open a notepad Alina had handed me earlier. "Just thank you." "It's gracias," he said, writing it down in neat block letters. "But you say it like this, gracias." I repeated it, badly. He laughed. "You'll get there." We ended up going through more words. Hello, water, bread, please, sleep. I scribbled them all down. Noah tested me like a casual tutor, sipping tea and sketching in his book between vocabulary drills. That night, as I lay in bed, the words whispered themselves back to me. Agua, pan dormir, gracias. They felt like a map. A small, stumbling way to exist in a world I hadn't meant to fall into. At the embassy, Alina became my fierce advocate. She stood beside me like a lioness in a cardigan, speaking quickly, firmly, never once letting me feel like a burden. She translated every instruction, every form, and when the staff seemed indifferent, she raised an eyebrow that could slice glass. "She's like a Spanish version of my Aunt Nancy," I told Noah later, and he grinned. "She's very effective. Have you ever seen her yell?" "Once, at a man who tried to cut the line at the bakery. He left without his croissants." There was a rhythm forming now, one that surprised me. I was supposed to feel anxious, stuck, suspended between countries and identities, but instead I was softening. Not entirely, but enough to start believing that kindness didn't always come with strings. One afternoon, Noah invited me to the cliffs. "They're just outside town," he said. "Good for clearing your head." I hesitated, but he added, "I'll bring snacks and my sketchbook." That sealed it. The walk was quiet at first. We passed wild fig trees, little chalky paths, and the occasional cyclist who nodded in greeting. When we reached the cliffs, I understood why he'd brought me here. The sea stretched out below us, moody and enormous, crashing against the rocks in slow, powerful waves. The wind tugged at my hair, and the air smelled clean like salt and stone and freedom. Noah sat down on the edge and opened his sketchbook. I stood beside him for a while before lowering myself to the grass. He didn't ask questions. He just drew. Eventually, I spoke. "My parents used to tell me I was too emotional." He looked up. "I always thought that meant I had to be quieter, smaller, less. Do you still believe that?" I thought about it. "Not right now." He smiled. I watched as his pencil moved across the page, soft lines forming the curve of the cliffs, the roll of the sea. "Do you draw people?" I asked. "Sometimes." "Could you draw me?" He looked up, surprised. "Now," I nodded. "Not for vanity, I want to see what I look like through someone else's eyes, someone who doesn't leave." He hesitated, then turned to a fresh page. "Okay." As he sketched, I stayed still, letting the ocean wind touch my skin like a blessing, letting myself be seen. When he was finished, he held up the page. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't flattering in the way a photograph might try to be. But it was me, raw, tired, but still here. I looked at the drawing for a long time, then whispered, "Gracias." He didn't correct my accent, he just nodded. And I realized I didn't need to be rescued anymore. I just needed to be witnessed. The cliffs became our thing. Every few days, we'd walk there in the late afternoon just before sunset. Noah always brought his sketchbook, and I brought silence, the good kind. The kind that didn't need filling. Some days we spoke. Some days we didn't. But the space between us felt safe. Not fragile, not performative, just real. Back at the house, life moved in gentle circles. Alina taught me to make tortilla española one morning, guiding my hands like a mother might teach a daughter. We messed up the first one, burned edges and too much onion. But she laughed, pinched my cheek, and handed me another potato. In the evenings, Noah and I would sit outside on the small back patio. There was an old string of lights overhead, a little crooked from age, but when they flickered on, the entire yard felt like something from a novel. He played music on a small Bluetooth speaker, sometimes Spanish indie bands I'd never heard of, sometimes old American classics. One night it was Otis Redding. "These Arms of Mine." The song curled around us like warm smoke. I was sipping tea when Noah asked, casually, "Why law school?" I blinked. The question didn't feel loaded, just curious. But it still hit me like a stone in water. Because it was the only answer that didn't cause a fight, I said, setting down my cup. At least not at first. Noah glanced over, waiting. I hadn't told him much about my family, just fragments. But that night, under soft lights and the safety of Spanish stars, I let it out. My mom's a corporate consultant, my dad's a judge. Their favorite word is legacy, and their least favorite word is pause. I could feel the old resentment rising, but I didn't try to bury it this time. I wanted to take a year off after college, just one. Travel, volunteer, maybe teach English somewhere. But when I brought it up, my mom laughed like I told her I wanted to join the circus. What'd your dad say? He didn't say anything. He just forwarded me a list of LSAT prep courses with the subject line. Timeline. Noah didn't speak. He didn't need to. I went on. Every time I brought up a different path, even for fun, they'd shut it down. Art. That's a hobby. Nonprofit work. You'll never pay off your loans. Even dating someone outside their little country club circle was worrying. So I started hiding things. Dreams, doubts, parts of myself that didn't match their blueprint. I looked up at the sky, then back at Noah. Coming here wasn't rebellion, it was desperation. I needed to know who I was without their voices in my head. Noah set down his pencil and leaned forward slightly. You know what I think? What? I think you were brave, even if it didn't look like it at the time. I swallowed hard, surprised by the lump in my throat. My mom told me once, he added, that the hardest thing a person can do is walk away from love that only loves them when they shrink. I blinked. That's what you did, he said. You stopped shrinking. A single tear slipped down my cheek. I wiped it away quickly. I didn't feel brave when they left. I felt disposable. You're not, he said quietly. Not even close. Something in his voice made me pause. I looked at him, really looked. There was a softness in his gaze that hadn't been there before, or maybe I just hadn't been ready to see it. Why did you help me? I asked. He smiled. You want the real answer, I nodded. Because you looked like someone who was trying very hard not to fall apart, and I've been that person. I didn't ask for details. I didn't need them. Some stories don't need to be shared in full to be understood. Later that night, back in my room, I pulled out the notepad we'd been using for Spanish phrases. On a new page, I wrote, legacy not equal to identity. Then beneath it, stop shrinking. I stared at the words for a long time. Then, almost on instinct, I tore the page out and taped it to the wall beside my bed. My parents had raised me to chase perfection. But maybe what I needed was permission to be whole. The day my temporary passport arrived, I thought I'd finally exhaled for the first time since the plaza. It came in a stiff envelope with a gold seal and a letter I could barely read through the haze of relief. Alina hugged me so tightly I nearly dropped it. Noah grinned, twirling the envelope like a ticket to freedom. It should have been a victory. We baked that afternoon apple tart, Alina's favorite. She insisted it was tradition to celebrate good news with something sweet. I helped slice the fruit, my hands still slightly trembling, not from fear, but the strange calm of finally having something again. Something with my name on it, something that proved I was real. The embassy called again the next morning to confirm final paperwork. I offered to go alone this time just to prove I could, but Noah insisted on driving me anyway. You don't need to prove anything, he said as we got into the car. It's not about strength, it's about letting people care. I didn't argue. For once, I liked being cared for. The embassy building felt different this time. Not hostile, just formal. Cold in a manageable way. I stepped up to the counter, signed where they pointed, and handed over documents with steady hands. Then the man behind the desk frowned slightly. There's a call for you. I blinked. What? Someone called earlier from the States. We told them you were scheduled to arrive today. My stomach tightened. Do I have to take it? It's on the secure line, he insisted. I already knew who it was before the phone was in my hand. My father's voice came through sharp and unforgiving, as though he hadn't been ignoring me for 10 days. Madeline. I didn't speak. The silence was safer. I don't know what kind of story you've told these people, he continued, but this is unacceptable. We had no choice but to leave. You were hysterical. You endangered your mother's health. I closed my eyes, gripping the phone tighter. You're coming home, he said, as if that were law. We've already contacted authorities. We've reported you as vulnerable, missing. This Noah person, this stranger you're living with, he's going to find himself in trouble. There it was, not worry, control, not concern for me, but concern for how I reflected on them. I'm not missing, I said finally, voice steady despite the tears threatening behind my eyes. I'm fine, I'm not going anywhere. You don't get to make these decisions. I do, I said louder now. I'm 22, I'm not a child. There was a long pause. Then quieter, more dangerous. You have no idea what kind of mess you're making. I held the phone away from my ear. My hand trembled, but I didn't drop it. I looked over at Noah, who was watching me with careful eyes. I ended the call. The embassy worker didn't comment. He just nodded solemnly and took back the receiver. Back in the car, I stared out the window. I should have seen this coming, I muttered. They threatened legal action. Noah asked gently. I nodded. They said I was missing. Vulnerable. That you, I paused, my voice tightening, that you were taking advantage of me. He didn't flinch, just gripped the wheel a little tighter. You okay? I don't know. Noah didn't push. We drove in silence, but it wasn't hollow. It was thick with understanding. When we got home, Alina made tea before I could even ask. You are not theirs to control, she said firmly as she placed the mug in front of me. You are not a little girl anymore. I don't know what happens next, I admitted. If they file something, if they keep calling, Alina met my eyes. Then we find a way. You are not alone in this. And for the first time, I believed her. I didn't sleep much that night. Not from fear exactly, just the kind of restless energy that comes after surviving something you didn't think you could. My father's voice still echoed in my ears, cold and commanding, like a ghost that had followed me across an ocean. But something had shifted this time. Something inside me didn't crumble. Instead, it began to build. The next morning, I walked into the kitchen already dressed. Alina raised an eyebrow. Embassy again, I nodded. I want to ask about legal options. I don't want to wait for another phone call to decide my life for me. Noah set down his sketchbook. I'll drive. No, I said gently, almost surprised by my own tone. I need to do this one alone. He didn't argue. He just handed me his umbrella, even though the sky was clear. Just in case, he said. And, you've got this. I took the metro into the city, this time without fear. I knew where I was going, I had a name, I had a voice, and even if it still trembled sometimes, it was mine. At the embassy, I spoke to a different woman, someone younger, with kind eyes and a slightly clipped accent that made me think she'd been in Spain even longer than I had. I told her everything. The abandonment, the threat, the false report of abduction. She didn't flinch. You're an adult, she said, flipping through forms. Your parents have no legal hold over you. Not here, not in the States. But what if they file something, if they accuse someone? Then we help you respond, she said. But you have every right to remain here if you choose. You are not in danger. You are not detained. You are free. The word caught me off guard. Free, not rescued, not returned. Free. She handed me a pamphlet with legal resources and underlined a name. She's an expat lawyer. Friendly, bilingual. You can call her if they escalate anything. But honestly, she smiled. Most of the time, bullies lose interest when you stop playing along. When I left, the sun was high overhead. The city looked different, not smaller, just less threatening. I stopped by a corner cafe and bought myself a coffee, the first one since arriving. It tasted like possibility. When I got back to the house, Noah and Alina were planting herbs in the tiny backyard garden. I stepped onto the patio, still holding the cup. I'm staying, I said. They both looked up. Staying, Alina asked. In Spain, I mean, at least for now. A beat passed. Then Alina clapped her hands, beaming. Finally she says it. Noah laughed and dusted off his hands. Does this mean we start house hunting? I grinned. Slow down. First, I need language classes and maybe a part-time job. Done, Alina said, already marching toward the kitchen. We plan. Over the next few days, something remarkable happened. I began to rebuild, not out of desperation, but out of choice. We found a local community center offering Spanish classes 3 times a week. I enrolled. On my first day, I stood in front of the class and introduced myself in broken Spanish. Me llamo Madeline, est aprendiendo, gracias por su paciencia. The room clapped. I nearly cried. I helped Alina organize a neighborhood food drive the following weekend. We spent hours bagging rice, sorting canned goods, laughing over broken boxes and nosy cats. People from the community came by and greeted me like I belonged, like I wasn't temporary. At night, Noah and I sat on the patio, not just talking anymore, but dreaming. I might want to teach, I told him once, or write something that feels honest. He looked up from his sketchbook. You'd be good at both. Thanks. I hesitated. Then added, you make me want to be the version of myself I buried. Noah didn't respond right away. He reached across the table and gently touched my hand. You already are, he said. The shift didn't happen all at once. There wasn't a single moment when I looked around and thought, yes, this is home now. It was quieter than that. Gentler. It crept in through routines. The way the barista at the corner cafe remembered my name, even with my shaky accent. The way Alina left sticky notes on the fridge with new Spanish verbs for me to learn, always accompanied by little smiley faces. The way Noah called me Mads when he was feeling playful, and Madeline when he wasn't, both sounding like affection. Every week I got better at the language. I started dreaming in Spanish, fragments at first, like overheard conversations. Then full, strange stories. My mind was making room for a new way of being. I helped Alina plan her charity's spring event, a donation drive for a nearby shelter. She handed me the clipboard without hesitation. You lead, she said. You're ready. It meant more than I expected. Noah and I fell into a rhythm of soft intimacy. We never defined anything. We didn't have to. Some evenings we'd walk to the cliffs and just sit in silence. Other nights he'd show me his art, delicate ink sketches of trees, faces, buildings that seemed to breathe. Sometimes I saw myself in them, not directly, but in shape or posture. A girl looking forward, never back. He never said it aloud. But I felt it in the way he looked at me, like I wasn't broken, just changing shape. One morning, we visited the market together. The vendors all knew Alina and by extension me. An old woman selling figs called me Hija daughter without blinking. Noah nudged me with a grin. You're basically royalty now. And I believed it in a quiet way. The city that had once felt like a maze now felt like a map I was drawing with each step. I had favorite streets, a favorite bench, a favorite word, esperanza, hope. There were hard moments, of course. Sometimes I woke up from dreams where I was still in that alley, shivering and helpless. Sometimes a phone number from the US popped up on Noah's screen, and I'd freeze until he answered and it wasn't them. But those moments passed faster now. The fear didn't root as deeply, because I had tools. I had a voice, and I had people who listened without trying to fix me, just witnessing, just holding space. One Sunday afternoon, as we laid out chairs for Alina's event in the park, I caught Noah looking at me, not in the usual way, different. He set down a basket of flyers and came to stand beside me, quiet for a moment. You know, he said, I've seen a lot of people come and go, travelers, students, even lost kids trying to find themselves. I turned toward him, curious. But you, he said, you didn't just find yourself, you chose yourself. That's rarer. I didn't know what to say, so I didn't say anything. I just reached for his hand. He held it without question, no tension, no hesitation, just warmth. And in that moment, surrounded by folding chairs, snack tables, and the hum of a city I'd once feared, I realized I hadn't just survived Valencia. I had become part of it. It was a Thursday afternoon, clear skies and humming breeze. I had just finished taping up the final flyers for Alina's fundraiser and was on my way back from the community center when my phone buzzed. A US number. I stopped in the middle of the sidewalk, thumb hovering over the screen. I didn't have to answer, but I did. Madeline. My mother's voice was different this time, frayed, watery. I didn't speak. I needed to hear you. She let out a shaky breath. We made a mistake. A terrible, terrible mistake. I leaned against a nearby wall, eyes tracing the sidewalk's cracks. You left me in a foreign city, I said slowly. Without a passport, without money, without anything, that's not a mistake, that's abandonment. I know, she whispered. And I haven't slept. Your father, he's trying to fix things, but I told him this wasn't right. We shouldn't have. She broke off into a sob. For a second, the old instinct kicked in, comfort her, make it easier, smooth things over. But I didn't move. Why now? I asked. Why are you calling now? Because I saw the photos, the embassy sent us proof you're safe, and you looked happy with them. I closed my eyes. So now that you know someone else took care of the mess you made, now you want to talk. No, she said. It's not that, we miss you. That word struck something inside me. Miss, you don't miss what you abandon, you miss what you expect to return. I don't think you miss me, I said. I think you miss control. Madeline, please, she said, voice small. Just come home, we'll forget this whole thing happened. I let out a breath. I haven't forgotten, and I don't want to. There was a long silence. I could almost hear her confusion, the way her mind must be racing to recalculate. I'm staying here, I said calmly. I've applied for a residency visa, I've enrolled in language classes, I've found people who don't punish me for being who I am. But we're your family. No, I said, gently but firmly. You were my family, and then you left me in a plaza and laughed as you drove away. Your father didn't laugh. I'm not doing this, I said. Madeline, please just talk to him. He wants to— No, I said again, this time with steel behind it. You don't get to come back just because I survived the damage you caused. And then I did something I never thought I'd have the strength to do. I ended the call, not in rage, not in tears, just in clarity. Later that evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, I told Noah what happened. He listened quietly, then asked, "Do you regret picking up?" I shook my head. No, I needed to hear it. I needed to know that I didn't need it anymore. He nodded. You know, he said after a pause, you could have screamed at her. You didn't. I don't want revenge, I said. I want peace. And for the first time since arriving in this country, I realized I had it. The air in the U.S. Embassy felt different this time. I wasn't here to plead, explain, or recover. I wasn't trembling with shame or fear. I walked through the glass doors with my head high and Noah beside me, steady and calm. I had an appointment to sign my residency papers, not a visa extension, not a permission slip. Residency. A choice. A stake in the ground that said, I belong here because I chose to stay. The same woman who had helped me weeks ago greeted me at the counter with a small smile. We've been expecting you. She handed me the folder with calm precision. These papers finalize your residency under the long-stay humanitarian exception based on abandonment and displacement. You've met every requirement, it's just a signature now. I looked down at the forms. There was my name, Madeline Grace Harlow. For a moment, I felt a flicker of something sharp, grief maybe, or mourning for the girl who'd once clung to that name, hoping it meant she mattered. Then I picked up the pen and signed, line after line. With each stroke, I felt lighter. When it was done, I slid the folder back across the counter. The woman glanced at Noah and smiled. Your friend can wait inside if you'd like to step into the back for a final review. But I shook my head. I want him here. She nodded. Noah stepped beside me, hand brushing mine as she clipped the documents into a folder and stamped the final approval. That was it. No fireworks, no dramatic moment. Just a single decision, honored. I turned to Noah as we stepped outside. The sunlight hit his face in that golden way that only happens in Valencia after 5 o'clock. You're officially a resident, he said, holding out his hand like I'd just won an award. I laughed and took it. No turning back now. We walked slowly toward the city center, passing cafes and musicians tuning their guitars on sidewalks. I didn't flinch when I saw a woman who looked like my mother.